I should tell you as we get started that this lecture and next Tuesday's lecture are easygoing lectures. And then starting from Thursday, the content, the material, there are going to be more slides. So I'll try to go faster starting from Thursday. And so things will get a little bit more intense in the weeks to come. So today's class and next Tuesday's class, hopefully they will be easygoing classes and I can make some like additional comments. And also, you can ask questions at any time. I would much rather to have like some of you asking questions and then push in, maybe part of the lecture to the next class, rather than just pushing ahead. So feel free to ask questions. If I can answer them, then I'll answer them. So today we're going to talk about prehistory. I didn't write it in because I didn't want to make, like, strictly speaking, there are I'm sorry, not six, 7 periods when we talk about history. There's the prehistorical time, and I could take up a whole bunch of classes if we had a lot of time, but we're kind of ignoring that. So the prehistorical part of history, we're just um, conflating that with this early civilization one under the heading of agricultural revolution. So just be aware of that. So agriculture itself began around 10,000 BCE. Right away, I have to say these dates are not exact. Different scholars, historians, anthropologists, they could have wildly different dates. Like some say maybe it started around 8,000 BCE. Some could say like 20,000 years ago. So these dates, I am not in any way saying that these are the correct dates. These are the dates that I'm using because I was given these dates by these, professors and these books that I use as reference. So this is Professor Starnes. So then what you need to do is study these figures, right? Study these numbers because they are the ones that'll be asked in the exam. And you can't say, well, I didn't choose 10,000 BCE because I think that is not the correct date, right? You can't be like that and argue with me after the exam, right? So please study what's on the slides. Even if we end up saying in class, like through maybe some discussion, yeah, maybe it's not really 10,000 BCE. Maybe it's like actually 20,000 BCE, according to the latest, studies or something, right? Even if we end up saying something like that, we stick with whatever is on the slide. So please be aware of that. So agriculture began around 10,000 BCE. Human species emerged around 2.5 million years ago as hunter-gatherers. Men were hunters, women were gatherers. Hey, I just realized that is a period. That's a mistake. That should be a comma. Men were hunters, women, comma, gatherers. There are three important points regarding prehistory before agriculture. We're speeding past these things very quickly. Three things that we should be aware of before agriculture. One was that between 2.5 million years and about 100,000 years ago, human species in different parts of the world went through various evolutionary phases. This is what they say. Somebody trying to come in? You can come in. If you're in this class, you should come in. Maybe, maybe they're not in this class. Um, okay, I don't want to digress too much with these things right from the beginning, but who knows, right? Who knows what happened 100,000 years ago? Nobody knows. We don't have a time machine, can't go back. to actually see what was happening 100,000 years ago, let alone 2.5 million years ago. So these are, at a certain level, just speculations, but these are speculations done by brilliant minds, archaeologists, anthropologists, biologists, people, with PhDs in science, carbon dating, whatever these techniques are that they use, these are the conclusions that they've drawn. But at the same time, because these are ultimately speculations, with further studies, they're constantly revising things, right? These numbers constantly get revised. So, but this is what we say between 2.5 million years ago and to about 100,000 years ago, human beings went through evolutionary phases. So we have these very difficult sounding words. Here's another thing that I'll say right away. Whatever is not on the slide. Notice this is not on the slide. This is an extra thing that I'm showing you to help my presentation. This is not part of the slide. So you don't have to know any of the words that appear on this. I mean, this is going to be part of the video recording. Hopefully, I'll be able to post the video recording this weekend of this class. But do not get confused. This is part of the video recording part of my presentation. But if it's not on the slide, you don't have to study this. Okay. Australopithecus robustus, these Latin names, Homo habilis, I think we say, Homo erectus. I know that sounds a little bit sexual, but it has nothing to do with sex. It just means a person begins to walk straight on two legs. That's why we say Homo erectus. So this is the first term that I'm kind of familiar with. This is where we begin to see human beings as human beings. The next two big, I guess, phases is Homo sapiens neanderthalensis. So this is like Homo sapiens Neanderthals, and then we have Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens is basically us. This is the beginning of modern humans. And before modern humans, we have Homo sapiens Neanderthals. So there's going to be a little bit of confusion here that I'll go through and then I'll talk about it just briefly. So Homo sapiens appeared in Africa around 300,000 years ago, and they spread all over the world. Development of speech gene happened sometime after that. And speech gene, I don't think it's a universally accepted concept, but some evolutionary biologists or anthropologists, they do talk about this thing called speech gene, that human beings developed this genetic trait that allowed human beings to develop human language. Animals have languages, right? Animals talk to each other, but they don't talk human language because they don't have that gene. I mean, we could say gene, we could say brain, right? Human beings developed some kind of capacity with the development of our brain to start talking to each other as like human beings. And speech gene is seen as a very important threshold for human beings becoming human beings because what are human beings without language, right? We are almost defined by language. We say language is a form of life, and human beings are human beings because we all speak human. I'm not just talking about like Korean or English. We're talking about human language. We all think the same way. So with the speech gene and the languages came the emergence of human societies. And then about 100,000 years ago, Homo sapiens sapiens appeared. And Homo sapiens sapiens is our direct ancestors. Let me say very briefly, we don't say Homo sapiens sapiens anymore, actually. We just say Homo sapiens now. Because apparently the latest scholarship is they used to say Neanderthals were Homo sapien Neanderthals, but now they don't think Neanderthals are Homo sapiens. So they just say Homo Neanderthals. That Neanderthals are not the same as human beings. They're actually kind of different species, but we interbred. There was interbreeding between Neanderthals and human beings. Just like, you have lions and you have tigers. They're seen as different species, but they can interbreed. And then we can have ligers or something, right? So that's what we say now, but officially in the textbook way, we still say Homo sapiens. That was about 300,000 years ago. So that's including the Neanderthals. And then Homo sapiens sapiens is us. That's only about 100,000 years ago. So um, it's sort of an awesome thing to think about if you think about it. We human beings appeared basically about 100,000 years ago. Life existed on this planet for about 3 billion years or something, right? Over 3 billion years. And then what appeared to be sort of like human-like beings appeared 2.5 million years ago, millions of years ago. And it's only about 100,000 years ago that we came along. And look what we've been doing to this planet. It's an awesome thought in terms of history. So that's one thing, right? The second thing is tools were used for millions of years, but Homo sapiens, that's like starting from 300,000 years, Homo sapiens became very adept at using tools for hunting, gathering, fighting with other humans, for all kinds of things. Tools are what made human beings the master of all of the planet. Tools, I should say, I'll come back to this toward the end of the course. What are tools but technology? It's a form of science and technology, isn't it? Human beings gained a technological advantage over all the other life forms on this planet. So we became the absolute top predator, the apex, we call it apex predator, right? We became the apex predators because of our ability to use tools. Yeah, we have a picture of a mammoth and I guess a Neanderthal using a spear. I mean, these animals are stronger than us, they're bigger than us. Many animals are faster than us, but they could not withstand the technological advantage that human beings had. Spears, clubs, stones are one thing. Once you get into the stage of human beings using, well, I guess you can throw spears, sure, but bows and arrows. What animal can fight against bows and arrows? You can't even run away anymore. Think about it. You can shoot down an animal from like, I don't know, 100 meters away or something, right? And the animal can't even run away. Human beings must have become the terror of all the other life forms on the planet, right? You see a human being, you run away. So that's what human beings became. With tools, we became the absolute masters of the planet. So that's an important thing about prehistory, that we became adapted using tools. And this is another thing. By the way, this is based on Professor Starnes, My Guiding Light, right? These are the things that he wrote about prehistory. Massive migrations. Human beings, right from the beginning, apparently, like 300,000 years ago, we traveled and we immigrated, we migrated to different places. We were travelers, explorers. From Africa, sapiens spread all over the world. And the reason given, again, these are all speculations, right? Is that hunting, we were hunter-gatherers. Hunting requires a lot of space. Uh, Again, I don't know how they figure these things out, but these are very smart people, so I trust what they say. Scholars, they said it most likely needed 6.5 square kilometers per person, hunter-gatherers. So that's why human beings spread out, because hunter-gatherers, you needed a lot of space. And then when human beings started crowding together, they would fight, right? So you would, instead of fighting and getting killed, you would move to a different space. So human beings spread all over the world. Um, I mean, so we say this is the reason given, but if you are a romantic, you have a romantic vision of humanity, you would say, no, that's just who we are. We are we are adventurers, right? We like exploring new places, new things, strange new worlds to explore, to discover new things. By 25,000 BCE, Homo sapiens sapiens were in every part of the world. We had spread out through all parts of the planet, except in some isolated, hard to reach places like New Zealand and some Pacific islands. But otherwise, we were basically everywhere, including Europe, the Americas, Asia, and even Australia, the continent of Australia, by 25,000 BCE. By 10,000 BCE, Uh, again, this I don't know how they come up with these numbers. They speculate about 10 million human beings were living on the planet. 10 million world population, very widely dispersed. So that's the stage for when the agricultural revolution happened. Agriculture. So, so this is now getting into history, right? Until slide 4, we've been talking about prehistory, before agriculture. That's the dividing line. Agriculture is the beginning of history. Agriculture is called Neolithic Revolution, Neo-Stone Age, New Stone Age. This is the biggest change in human history. Agriculture resulted in dramatic population increase, and it led to complex societies and to civilization. I'll have more to talk about this, but so Neolithic Revolution because this was still the Stone Age, the New Stone Age, and it's consistently quoted as the biggest change in human history. This is the thing that created almost directly civilization. Without agricultural revolution, we would not be where we are today. So agriculture is the biggest, it's known as the biggest change in human history. So when these AI apologists, when they say, oh, AI is, it's as big as the discovery of fire or as big as the agricultural revolution, they're making a very, very big claim. The two biggest changes are usually talked about as first is agriculture, that's the most important. And then the second most important event is seen as the Industrial Revolution. That's what we say, agriculture industrial revolution. The first agricultural regions, again, scholars figured this out somehow, is the Middle East in a region that we call Fertile Crescent. This is sometimes known as the cradle of civilization. So this is the Fertile Crescent. And the time period is between 10,000 to 8,000 BCE, and they mostly grew wheat and barley. So this is the Fertile Crescent. It's called crescent because you see the green like a crescent, like a crescent moon, right? A thin crescent moon. So it includes basically Mesopotamia and Nile in Egypt. So Nile, that's the northern African continent. And then the Mediterranean Sea there, that's where Israel is now, Mesopotamia. They say first civilization occurred between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. That region of Mesopotamia, that's the most fertile place, and that is where agriculture most likely first developed around 10,000 years ago. And then I guess maybe a couple of thousand years ago, maybe around 7,000 or 6,000 BCE, agriculture started around the Nile region, and that's where Egyptian civilization developed. Here we have an old ancient, I guess, painting, reconstructed, I'm sure, recolored of a farmer. I'm not sure if this is Mesopotamia or Egypt. So according to this painting, probably right from the beginning, they started using animals like oxen to till the ground. Um, so that's the first. The first agricultural region is the Fertile Crescent. And then scholars point to China as probably the second oldest region where agricultural revolution happened. Yangtze River rice around 8,000 years ago, and then I'm sorry, 10,000 years ago, I should say, right? Because this is 8,000 BCE, so that's around 10,000 years ago. 10,000 BC, that's 12,000 years ago. And then Yellow River is around 1,000 years later, 7,000 BCE. So if you look at the map of China, this blue line there, that's the Yangtze. I'm sorry, I think you pronounce it Yangtze. Uh, any Chinese student here? I think it's pronounced Yangtze. Not sure. English speakers, I think they'll say Yangtze, but I heard people say, oh, it's supposed to be Yangtze. And then Huanghe, that's the Yellow River. Um, so apparently Yangtze agriculture started happening at Yangtze way earlier, and yet somehow civilization started not around Yangtze River, but around the Yellow River much later. So that's an interesting thing that happened in China. I think this is a picture of Yangtze River, these winding rivers, waterways. And then they talk about Central America, agriculture happening there around 5,000 BCE, corn, beans, pumpkins, potatoes. Central America, by this time, um, I'm not going to talk about Central America too much. I'll just talk about it very little. So this is apparently yet another major region where agriculture started. And these are all independent places, right, where agriculture naturally developed by human beings. And yet, if you look at civilization, civilization started way, way later. I think one of the oldest here was like 1345 BCE or 2000 BCE. So that's way later than when agriculture first started, 5000 BCE. So these are the first regions where agriculture started. There are other possible places that scholars speculate could have happened, like sub-Saharan Africa. Agriculture could have started there on its own. That's a speculation. New Guinea, nowadays we know New Guinea as like, I'm not sure about the geography, but I think it's the eastern part of New Guinea is like called Papua New Guinea, right? And the western part is part of Indonesia. Yes, yes, okay. I'm not totally sure, but apparently I that island could have been another area where agriculture originated, but we're not sure, right? The other parts, so we say was agriculture was disseminated to that region, right? So agriculture started from these regions independently, and then the knowledge, the technology of agriculture spread from these places to the rest of the planet. Agriculture, these are some separate, like additional points. I don't want to talk about these too much. Let me just check the time because I don't want to run out of time. Oh, until 2:45, right? Agriculture most likely was developed by women. How do they know these things, right? I keep thinking, like, how did they know that it was women? Well, again, it's just educated guesses, right? But anthropologists do know that men were the hunterers and women were the gatherers. Women and children, they were the gatherers. And so it stands to reason that it was the gatherers that first discovered agriculture. Most likely women, because they gathered grains, right? They probably dropped some of the grains and then noticed several months later, wait a minute, there's new crop growing. Oh, that's where I dropped these, bunch of seeds, grains. So that's probably how agriculture was discovered by the gatherers. And then once they discovered that these seeds, you plant them and then uh, you have new grain, um, they discovered the techniques and developed the techniques, the technology of agriculture. I've already talked about this. The dates given can change, but for our purpose, we stick with these numbers. Um, Shoot, where was that? This is recently, fairly recently. there was some scholar, some study paper published saying there may have been agriculture happening in China like 13,000 BCE or something, right? Then that would change the dates again. But these are, like I said, these dates are constantly being studied and talked about. Okay, so that is the first agricultural regions. Historians say agriculture spread slowly. And so they asked the question, why did it spread slowly? If agriculture was this huge change in how human beings lived, if this was such a big revolutionary thing, why did it spread slowly? Why didn't it go viral, right? And like almost instantly spread out through the whole planet. But it apparently spread very slowly. And so some of the reasons given why is, well, back then, contacts among peoples were limited. I think I said Tuesday, history isn't always like uh, repeating things. History does develop, right? So they do talk about this great divide until like about a thousand years ago. People were not integrated as much. So the story of history usually before then was just local regional stories. And then from about 1000 CE, year 1000 CE, forces of globalization started accelerating. So back then, 10,000 BCE or 8,000 BC, whatever, contacts among peoples were limited. That could be one of the reasons why the spread of agriculture happened slowly. Agriculture's sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary means you don't move, you stay put in one place. Uh, the total opposite of hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Hunter-gatherers, you move, you lead a nomadic life. You follow the animals. If the animals move away, you follow the animals. And gathering as well, because you don't plant seeds, right? You gather up all the fruits and vegetables of a place, you deplete the resources, and then you move on to a new place, right? So the sedentary lifestyle likely further reduced context because people, once they settled, they weren't moving anymore. So they weren't coming into contact with other people. Uh, this example, I'm pretty sure, is Stearns. This may be from another scholar, but this is an example of how agriculture spread from the Middle East to Europe. Now, there is big distance there, right? From the Middle East to Europe, that's quite a bit of distance, right? But still, they say it took over 1,000 years. I mean, that's a great distance, but 1,000 years, a human being walking, migrating from the Middle East to Europe, that should have taken maybe a generation, a couple of generations, several generations. That's like 100 years, maybe, right? Why did it take over 1,000 years? So it spread very slowly. Um, so yeah, sedentary lifestyle, further reduced context. So the example given is it took over 1,000 years. And then yet another reason given why agriculture spread slowly is that not all regions were suitable for agriculture. If a region was heavily forested, or if a region was dry lands, like desert region, like you couldn't do agriculture there. So that could be another reason. People living there had to live in other ways, had a different lifestyle. Alternative systems persisted as well. Agriculture meant settling, but some liked the ability to move around. The nomadic lifestyle, the nomadic lifestyle was treasured by some people in some cultures. And even nowadays, the nomadic lifestyle is treasured by some people, even nowadays, right? We call them nomadic people. Usually, they don't live in cities, obviously, the people who are nomadic. So these nomadic lifestyle was treasured in some Middle Eastern, African, American societies, and also the steppes of Central and Northern Asia. Many of these places, they developed into pastoral pastoral herding societies. Pastoral herding societies. And the picture you see is an example of that. If you don't know what a steppe is basically grassland. And I'm going to show you a map of that. Again, these things you don't have to study just so that you know what steppes are. So we say steppes are where the Huns, the Mongols came from. So Mongols, I think that's like Eastern steppe. But it's surprising to learn that steppe isn't just Asia. We think of the steppes because we think of the Mongols, right? So we think of like northern Asia, but steppes, the grasslands extend all the way to the Western steppes, Kazakhstan, Russia, all the way to Ukraine, and even goes down to some parts of Turkey are identified as steppes, steppe areas, grasslands. Um, so in these regions, you would expect the lifestyle to be nomadic because grasslands, usually you would think that's not good for agriculture. Instead, they raise animals, herds, pastoral lifestyle because grasslands. But that's the stereotypical image we have of steppes. But if you look at the example of a place like Ukraine, Ukraine is actually um, the best agricultural region in Europe. It's actually known as the breadbasket of Europe. That's why a lot of, I think one of the reasons why Hitler wanted to invade Russia was he wanted to take over Ukraine because it's known as the breadbasket. The soil, the black soil of Ukraine is so rich that it's a great agricultural area. So that's what steppe is. It's just grasslands. And here's a picture of modern, I think this is Mongolia, I'm not quite sure, of grassland. What life must be like at a place like this. Vast, endless fields of grass, and you're on your horse and you're riding. It's a different kind of lifestyle. So that's steppes. So agriculture became the way of life for most societies by 5000 BCE, around 5000 BCE. So it started around 10,000 BCE. We're looking at 5,000 years. And then in that time, it became the way of life for most societies, not all, most societies. Some of the impact of agriculture, the agricultural revolution brought about some profound changes to humans, to humanity. The first thing is obviously the nature of work changed, especially for men. For women, you could say, well, it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? Women were gatherers. Women and children were gatherers. And once agriculture started, you would expect women to be doing all the agricultural work because that's their thing. Women were gatherers. You would harvest things, right? But because men got involved as well, for men to change from being hunters to farmers, that was a dramatic change. Uh, Apparently, again, these are, to me, like, how do you know these things? Very speculative, but apparently, hunting required about 3 hours of work per day. Could you imagine having a job today where you work for 3 hours a day? But apparently that was kind of what it was, hunting. I suppose it's understandable. I suppose you walk all day, you go to a place, and then you find some animal trail, right? And then the actual work of hunting would be, you start chasing the animal, you start fighting and killing animals. I'm not sure how they calculate this, but apparently it was about 3 hours of work per day. But agriculture was a full-time job and much less exciting. Why would any man want to be a farmer if he could be a hunter? So that's an interesting question that historians ask about this time, right? Why did men turn from hunting to farming? Why didn't it just remain a women's job? Why did men turn? Um, Hunting must have been a glorious thing. I think I have some pictures here. Hunting must have been exciting. I mean, it must have been dangerous, right? But so you have like spears and fire here. But I imagine realistically, most of it was just throwing like spears and shooting arrows at animals, right? Um, but um, you do have to think of some dangers. It could be dangerous, I guess. So uh, I'm sure it was in many ways exciting because dangerous. And so you could imagine men after a hunt sitting around a fire, right, bragging about their kill, right? And I think that's probably the reason for these drawings on cave walls, right? Look what an exciting thing we did, right? Glorious thing we did, with our bows and arrows. We were hunting buffaloes, kind of thing. Um, but farming, not so glorious. Your back is bent, right? And you're tilling the ground, not so glorious. One reason given, and this is just speculation, I don't think this is even a major reason given. Before I get to the next slide, I guess the major reason given is because agriculture provided food in abundance. That's got to be the major reason, right? You stop being hunters because agriculture promised food in abundance. And we don't have to move. Maybe people get tired of moving around. We can settle, we can have a permanent house, a house of our own, neighborhood, neighbors, right? And build up a society. Those are promising things to people. But one reason given, and this is often talked about like sort of half as a joke, but I don't think it's just a joke. Some scholars talk about it seriously. One of the reasons why men turned to farming may have been because of alcohol. Uh, there's there's evidence that alcohol was discovered even before agriculture. This is like recent stuff. Some people started saying they may have discovered beer maybe like around 13,000 years ago. And they may have used alcohol for like ritual practices, right? Because you drink alcohol and you enter a different state of being, right? You can begin to like hallucinate. So they may have uh, latched onto agriculture, men anyway, because agriculture, barley, produces alcohol, beer. So that's a reason given for why men gave up hunting so that they could get drunk. Uh, I know it sounds funny, but that really may have been a reason. Alcoholic drinks have always been with us ever since the agricultural revolution. It's biblical, right? Biblical. Wasn't there a story of wait a minute, sorry, let me just check the time. I don't want to run out of time. We have lots of time. Wasn't there a biblical story about Noah? Noah and the great flood, right? The first thing they did after the flood, I mean, agriculture, and then Noah got drunk. The first thing with the first harvest, right? They made the fermented barley and he got drunk. I think that was part of the story of I'm sure it was Noah, right? Who knows their Bible here? Who's a Bible expert? Let's move on. Let's move on. Agriculture massively redefined gender relations. So this is something people don't know often. They just kind of gloss over this. But this is again from Professor Stearns, I believe. He says agriculture it ended up being a big negative for women because it massively redefined gender relations. Before agriculture, men and women had separately contributed to the food supply, and women were not systematically treated as inferior to men. I've heard scientists say this actually about hunter-gatherer societies. Men's job was more glorious because it was hunting. They could boast about hunting. But in terms of actually contributing to the nutritional diet to the society, women were actually doing more work because the gathering provided more nutritious and more constant sustenance or something. So they had their separate jobs, and there was more of an equal relationship than what came after agriculture. If they were not equal to men, at least they were not systematically treated as inferior. But that started happening when agriculture came. In agricultural societies, patriarchal systems ended up dominating to different degrees in different societies. But in all agricultural societies, ultimately, almost inevitably, they introduced male dominance over women. This is something that happened in all different societies. And so the question is, why? Why did this happen? Uh, These are the reasons for how patriarchy developed because of agriculture. More abundant food supply made women have many more children. You begin to have a sedentary lifestyle. You stay put at one place. I suppose it's a good thing. I don't know. I don't want to talk about this all like as if this is a negative thing. So there were many good aspects to the agricultural lifestyle. You settle down, you build a good home, right? It's not just tents anymore, right? You don't have to be moving all the time. And so once you get settled, I guess men and women being men and women, they mate more, right? And then women become pregnant. And I think also with hunter-gatherer societies, you didn't want to have many children. So there may have been more infanticide, right? Because if you're on the move, you didn't want to have like 10 children to feed because food was always scarce, right? But once food became more abundant and you were permanently settled, women began to have many more children. But that also meant they were preoccupied raising children. Pregnancies, raising children made it difficult for women to farm. And so men naturally began to assume the primary role of farming. I imagine you could also make the argument, well, men are stronger, right? So they do more work. Maybe that was one of the reasons, but I'm not sure if that is actually a good argument. I'm not sure if you need a lot of strength to farm because people began to use animals, right? And tools of farming. So probably realistically, the major reason why men took over is that women began to have many, many more children. And also, I imagine because children are good, we don't think of children as something bad, right? So more children, the better, right? So I'm sure it was uh, a good thing that happened. But along with children came this uh, role switch. Uh, I know this isn't ancient times, but just to like make that point, right? This is the picture. The caption said this is the picture of an American farmer with 10 children. So you have the farmer there, his wife, right? And you have 10 children. Maybe this is a big family, right? Extraordinarily big, but a farming family would want to have many children, especially sons. Sons were better than daughters for farming, apparently. So you could see where, you could kind of see the causes of patriarchy. It just naturally developing. Okay, so um, this gave rise to patriarchy in virtually all agricultural societies, including preference for sons, because men took over farming, sons would be more helpful for farming. And sons worked along with their parents. The place of children in society also changed. we don't think about children much, but their place in society in a hunter-gatherer society was not the same as their place in an agricultural society. Apparently, in hunter-gatherer society, children were left free to play, I guess, or maybe help their moms with gathering activities. But I think children in a hunter-gatherer society were left to play and not be a burden to anyone, I guess. But children in an agricultural society were expected to farm, help their parents do the work of farming because farming was a full-time job. So right before they had few functions until adulthood. And now in an agricultural society, they had to start working much earlier because children could farm as well. Agriculture changed, therefore, is like a conclusion. It changed the most basic of human relationships. Men began to rule over women, and women began to have many, many more children. And having sons was seen as more valuable than having daughters. Um, I think in ancient times, there were always infanticide in any society. There was always a degree of infanticide, killing children, killing babies, right? But I think this is where the practice of killing daughters over killing sons probably began, right? Infanticide, I think, had much to do with killing daughters and not sons, because sons were seen as more valuable. So, was agriculture a good thing for humans? So again, this is referencing Professor Stearns. I mean, we just went through talking about how agriculture had, uh, and especially in terms of gender relations, it produced a lot of negatives. And here are more negatives of agriculture, more drawbacks. Because human beings became sedentary, land became a fixed resource. When we were hunter-gatherers, we could always move around, move to a new place. To human beings back then, the earth was an infinitely large place. The world was infinitely large, right? You could always move to another place until maybe you hit the ocean, maybe, right? And then you make a turn and you just go north or go south, right? Unless if you were some human beings living on an island, the world was an infinite, represented infinite resource. But once you settle down, uh, things became finite. So fixed resource, that produced a lot of side effects. It produced, let's see, created big clustered societies. Maybe that in itself is not a bad thing, but big clustered societies brought with them vulnerability to things like diseases and to warfare. If you had good piece of land, right? Other human beings could desire your land and come attacking your land, your village, your town. So warfare became a thing because of land, right? When you fight a group of people, usually it's over resources, and agriculture fixed our resources and therefore warfare. I imagine hunter-gatherers fought as well, but I mean, I'm sure it wasn't the same kind of thing, right? If you encountered a group of people who seemed stronger than you just move away, right? Okay, you guys can have, the type, I don't know, the bears, the animals here, we'll just hunt at a different place. The world is a huge place. It's infinitely large, but with agriculture came warfare. The other negative is, as you see it here, slavery became a thing. Because why not, right? Why till the ground yourself if you could capture other human beings and make them work? So slavery-based farming became a part of human society. So these are all negative things. And some societies, again, this is scholars somehow figuring things out. Some societies ended up damaging their environment to such an extent, like through things like deforestation and soil depletion. I suppose soil depletion is actually lack of technology, lack of technological knowledge. They just didn't know any better, right? That you had to let even soil rest, right? You had to rotate, right? You till the you grow crops for a few years and then you have to let that area rest for a few years. They didn't know things like that. So some societies ended up depleting all the nutrients in their soil, and then the society would collapse. And so some societies likely disappeared as a result. Um, so we have, I think I have some pictures here. Like we'll talk about the Harappan civilization, Indus Valley civilization next week, just briefly. Apparently, one of the reasons why this civilization disappeared, again, it's all speculation, may have been because of over use of their soil. They agricultured themselves out of existence and deforestation, things like that. I saw this movie, Rapa Nui. This is an old movie when this guy, what's his name? Jason Scott Lee, I think. He portrayed Bruce Lee in one of these movies. This is an old movie, but this is a movie about Rapa Nui. Rapa Nui is a name for Easter Island. I'm sure you guys have all seen the next, yeah, this statue. This is Easter Island, and the story is there used to be this group of people that lived, the indigenous people that lived on the island, and these people disappeared because of soil depletion and deforestation. Apparently they something to do with their religious beliefs. And in the movie anyway, it's part of it is their religious belief. They believed in these gods, and they were obsessed with making these huge statues, and they cut down all their trees, not realizing that they were basically committing suicide, right? And the people disappeared. That's part of the story of Rapa Nui. So some societies, they didn't manage their farming well, their environment well, and they ended up disappearing. These negatives, these are some of the negatives. Uh, but at the end of the day, agriculture is seen as a good thing. Even with these drawbacks, these negatives, agriculture is seen as a terrific thing because agriculture was a necessary precursor of civilization. Without agriculture, we would not have civilization. And we want to be civilized. We are all civilized beings. We don't want to be, what is the opposite of civilized? What is the opposite of civilized? Is anyone listening to me? I guess all this. Anyone? Because I'm saying this because we still have time. This is the last slide, right? We still have time. What is the opposite of civilized? Degeneration is, sorry? That's like a cop out, isn't it? Of course, opposite of civilized. I wouldn't say degeneration. Degeneration means you were a thing and then you become less of that thing. You degenerate. If you're not civilized, you are called a savage. Savage is someone who is not civilized, right? So none of us, I think, would want to be considered a savage. Civilization is, that's how human history starts, right? Civilization is the beginning. Well, agriculture is the beginning, and then civilization is where we get our our history from. That's the beginning of who we are. Our story begins with civilization. And agriculture was a necessary ingredient for the birth of civilization. So that must be seen as a very good thing. It led to incredible population expansion, and agriculture was the way of life ever since 10,000 years ago, 10,000 years, 12,000 years ago, 10,000 BCE, agriculture began, and that was the way of life for all of us until the Industrial Revolution. Even after the Industrial Revolution, I think even until maybe I don't know, about 100 years ago, most of the world was still agrarian societies, right? Agrarian societies. And now we human beings are rapidly changing into like city people. There are more and more urban centers, and um, agricultural regions are shrinking, I guess. More and more people leave farms. So our way of life began to change starting from the Industrial Revolution, but it began to accelerate maybe only about 100 years ago. But if you think about that, we say 100 years ago until the Industrial Revolution. That means for thousands of years, right? We were all agricultural creatures of agriculture. So this was our way of life for thousands of years. And it led to an incredible population expansion. Uh, Agricultural societies required about, this is ancient, not nowadays, obviously, but these ancient first agricultural societies required about 80% of the population to be engaged in farming. Their primary job would be farming. But then that allowed about 20% of that society to engage in other activities. I put that in red because that is very significant, right? Agriculture allowed human societies to grow, or human society to grow, to have many, many more people. And then having all these people allowed that society to have division of labor. That's an economic thing, right? To have division of labor because we have food in abundance. Okay, 80% of the people, we're farmers, but then we can allow about 20% of us to do other things, like make pottery, right? Build houses, right? Or maybe you could be soldiers, defend our society from, other tribes, other people. Or maybe even to have government officials, to have a government, to have a state, to even have a king, to have organized religion. All that came from the 20% who did not have to farm. And so this 20%, this is what, I'm sorry, the whole thing, the whole situation led to the building of cities, development of cities, but people who lived in the cities were not farmers. So this is the 20% that did not have to farm. They could do things in a city, build up their cities. And this is the crucial feature that allowed civilization to develop, building of cities. And I have a picture that I will show you next week. This, I think, is the city of Ur, city of Ur, U-R, one of the first mega cities of ancient civilization in Mesopotamia. This is what agriculture allowed human beings to create. I'll talk about this next week, but if you look at the word civilization, civilization means of the city, right? Civis, that means of the city. So um, we have agriculture to thank for the creation of this. I think I finished way too early. We still have 15 minutes. I'm not going to talk to you for 15 minutes because why? Why would I do that, right? We finished early. Maybe next Tuesday it'll be the same thing. Maybe we'll finish a little early. Now that I've noticed we finished early today, it may be the same next Tuesday, but probably not next Thursday. So if you have questions, you can come up to me and ask questions because you still have 15 minutes. Otherwise, have a wonderful week, everyone. I will see you Tuesday.